Welcome, everyone, to the First Name Basis podcast. This is where we chat with industry leaders and special guests and TribalScale employees to have an authentic but informal conversation on a variety of relevant tech and innovation topics. Today, we're going to be chatting a lot about the banking space. And with me today, I got Katie Sokalsky. I hope I said that right, Katie.
Great job, Sheetal. Yeah.
Did I get it right? Yeah, Sokalsky.
Got it right, yeah.
Who's the VP of Digital Product Management at Scotia Bank. And I also have with me a friend of mine who I've known, over 20 years, Brent HoYoung, who's the CEO of Dream Payments. So welcome to the podcast, guys.
Thanks a lot, Sheetal. This is great.
Thank you. It's fun to be here.
Well, thanks for joining me. I wanted to start off by, I always start off by letting our listeners and viewers get to know a little bit about you and your journey and how you got here. So Katie, why don't you kick us off? How did you end up at Scotia Bank, and what have you done in your career? The good, the bad, the ugly to get over here.
Well, I don't know whether we have enough time for the ugly, but I worked in the banking space for most of my career. I started in professional services at PwC. I left and started my own company for a bit, and then I ended up joining a startup at the time called BitGold, and we later became Gold Money, and we were a fintech based here in Toronto, trying to create a global gold-backed bank, which was a super fun experience.
Okay.
I then
very cool. So completely the opposite of what the Federal Reserve does.
It is exactly the opposite. Yeah. So it's going back, many, many years to when money was backed by an asset. So we were essentially we were making gold fungible. So you could spend gold at Starbucks, which is something that you haven't been able to do in a long period of time. So we were trying to transform the way people think about banking and the way they think about money, and really financial services. And that was super fun. We grew globally. And then at the time, the platform was quite developed. And I started talking to Scotiabank about joining them to take a similar lens of transforming the way in which we think about money and the way in which we think about banking at a established organization. And so I joined Scotiabank about 3 years ago and have been leading the product management team, responsible for all of the retail properties. So anything that a customer does through the mobile app or website.
Yep.
And we're trying to both change the way the bank thinks about technology, but also the way in which we interact with our customers and how they think about money and how they think about their own financial health. And it's been a really fun experience. So
really
I went from kind of being a fintech on the outside to now being kind of a change agent in the inside of a large and well-established organization. So two totally different roles.
And as you, myself, and Brent know, much needed in our 5 major banks here in Canada.
For sure.
Well, we're going to peel a lot of layers off the onion there on that, because you already hit a couple of themes that I want to discuss a little further. Brent, what up, dog?
Hey, man. Hey.
Besides making the poor decision of becoming friends with me a long time ago, tell us a little bit about you.
Regretting it ever since, absolutely. But no, thanks for having me here today. So I think, I'm a CEO of a company called Dream Payments. We're a fintech sort of startup in the financial services domain. In terms of my background, I literally, I think I grew my passion for financial services, mobile money, if you will, as well, probably from the time I was a little kid. My parents were immigrants from Jamaica. And, as many immigrant families, right, you're responsible, or you have responsibility to send money home, help out those that are left behind. And so I saw my family, having to literally send cash back home in envelopes or go to really expensive remittance companies to support loved ones back in Jamaica.
Or give it to some shady dude and hope somebody else gives the money on the other side. I remember my family doing that.
Yeah, literally, right? Sort of, for us, kind of Jamaican Hawala networks, right?
Yeah.
And which, you're supporting your family, but it was difficult to do, expensive. There was a time too, we'd spend like a whole year filling what we call a barrel with like goods, right? Like just, clothes and toothpaste, coffee, whatever. And you'd literally pay a shipper to send that back home, right? So just horrible. And it got to a point where family back home was like, hey, enough with you sending me things that I might not want. Like, give me cash, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I've spent my career kind of solving for this problem, right? Helping people get access to financial services and do it in a digital way. And so I went to university, was an electrical engineer, spent some time at an SI firm, but founded or co-founded a technology development firm, sort of like a baby TribalScale, if you will. In my role,
you inspired me a lot, man, for me to start this organization. I'll say that.
Well, you've done a fantastic job, so hats off to you there. But my role at the company was really about mobile financial services, right? So helping consumers get access to whether it be a mobile wallet or access to their funds through their mobile channel. And so that was over 10 years ago, and had a fantastic journey with that. Learned a lot. Worked with companies like Western Union. We helped them build out their entire mobile product that could allow, say, a migrant worker from Mexico to work in Texas and to support his family back home, and not have to go into a money transfer location at the end of day or something like that, right? They could really remove money from home. So really exciting. Went to the Middle East, worked with all the way in Afghanistan to help the mobile money provider there called M-Pesa, helping them mobilize financial services and providing access to payment services in a market where the majority of the citizens are illiterate, literally keep cash under their mattress, right? Mm-hmm. But now helping them to get into the banking and the payment world. So had a ton of fun doing that, learned a lot, and then started Dream. And so with what Dream is doing is we are helping financial institutions provide payment services to business customers, right? So that could be helping a business accept a digital or a mobile payment and not have to accept cash, which is very relevant in this sort of COVID pandemic, where the last thing you want to do is handle any sort of cash or currency, as well as helping businesses send a digital payment. So we're helping insurance carriers no longer have to send checks, which would be horrible for a customer to have to receive right now, right? So net
that just takes so long, right? Like it just takes so long. If you look in the U.S. and or even here in Canada, if you just even look at our CERB program, like being able to send money really quick and get it in people's hands was super important.
Yeah, it's unbelievable that we're in 2020 and we are still reliant on checks that might take days or weeks for the end recipient to receive. And in this time, right, the time where people need it most, businesses need it most, like forcing them to wait for a check, but then also forcing someone to leave their shelter of their home to walk into a bank branch potentially, or a check cashing agent, when there's digital options. So we're really tackling that problem, and there's it exists, but there are solutions out there, and we're helping in that domain.
So Katie, just to build off what Brent was just talking about, the bank, and I've heard this from a lot of our financial services clients that we're speaking to, have had to face change so fast because of the COVID pandemic. You have to take into account that people don't want to be coming into your branches. There's obviously a demographic of the population that doesn't know how to use technology really well, and there's a lot of capabilities that just haven't even been developed in a digital way through your banking service provider. What were some of the things that right away kicked into real high gear for you as soon as this pandemic became real at Scotiabank?
Yeah, I remember at the start of the pandemic, talking to friends or seeing on Instagram people who were getting into doing puzzles and all these things to fill their time. And that was probably the busiest time in my career, was the kind of first 4 weeks after kind of moving to work from home. Mm-hmm. One of the things that was probably most interesting was how quickly not only did we change the way as a bank we're serving our clients, but working really closely with the federal government around the relief programs that they were rolling out. And so to kind of build on Brent's conversation around checks and kind of the inefficiency in that form of payment, we've been working with the federal government for some time around rethinking a lot of how we do either payment disbursement or identity verification, from either CRA payments or support payments to getting people to get those funds deposited directly in their bank account. And so the mobilizing for people to be able to apply for CERB right through their banking app and have those funds not, get mailed to them in some way and have to go into a branch, but have that auto deposited directly into their bank account within a few days was a huge piece of work that we got up in about a week.
Amazing.
And so I think
how'd you do that? Doesn't it take like 20 executives all getting in a room for a year and a half before you guys launch something?
It's amazing what you can do when everyone is working 24 hours a day, and you can call anyone on the phone at any hour in that type of time period. So we had in those kind of early days as a bank executive team, we were having I'm sure there was many more than what I was participating in, but I was participating in 2 or 3 times a day check-ins as kind of a whole executive team, where anytime we had to make quick decisions, we had all the people who needed to be there to do that. So it was the fastest we've ever gotten anything done. I mean, even just coding the software to do that, I am so grateful for the engineering and design and product team who I think really worked probably 24 hours a day for about a week to get some of that up. But we were really motivated by the fact that we were trying to help people in a really critical time of need, which is something that motivates me in the banking space, but especially during this COVID time period. It was, we didn't have to ask, anyone to kind of go above and beyond. Really, the whole team was raising their hand to say, I can work as much as we need to try and get this really important thing out for Canadians. So that was really motivating.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, there's a lot that we were doing around how we pivot even just the banking relationship, but I would say probably about half of my time so far has been, how can we help to support the government work? And half of it is, okay, then also excluding the government work, how do we change the way we're servicing a banking relationship, even outside of CERB and CEWS and all of the other programs that we were supporting? So it was about 50-50. But sorry, Sheetal, what were you saying?
No, I was going to say before we get to the other stuff, just working with the government, did it work to Canada's advantage that they only had like 5 major financial institutions to work with to get this done, as opposed to the U.S. where, you hear nightmare stories where, as Brent was talking about, checks aren't being sent, the PPP loans are being dispersed, companies don't know if they got them, if they never got them. It was quite a nightmare.
Yeah, I think certainly from the parts that I've participated in, one of the things that does work quite well in Canada is that really strong partnership between the banks and the government, and that the government can really bring together, the 5 or 6 or 7 CEOs, depending on how you're kind of slicing that. And they are able to really represent almost the entire population. I have friends in the US who are still trying to figure out how they get paid and where they are in the process and what's happening. And so I think certainly being able for us to take a unified approach on a lot of the kind of CERB and early days with the government, we had all of our risk teams together, all of our technology teams across the government and all the banks, and really doing a collective mind share on what is the way that we could do this as quickly and in a way that protects people and protects their money and protects their identity, which is critical in all of this. But it was actually really quite a nice thing to witness, of kind of everyone putting their own either work or agenda aside and just coming together around a common good. I mean, we were one of the fastest to get the relief efforts out. And we had calls. Our tech team walked, the other organizations through, like, this is how we did it. This is ways in which we found efficiencies to also help them to kind of learn from that. So it was very much a collaborative effort as opposed to a competitive effort, which was really nice to see in this kind of crisis moment.
Brent, you've been doing a lot of work with not only financial institutions here in Canada, but south of the border. What are you seeing happen over there, especially after this pandemic? Like, what are they coming to you and talking to you about, since dispersing payments seems to be like the largest pain point?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great question. The interesting thing, I think North America is so advanced, right? Whether it be Canada or the US, in terms of everything digital, and then by proxy into financial services. But what we're seeing here is that maybe in the US, depending on the the research report, right? There's 60 billion or 60 million underbanked people, right?
Right.
Unbanked as well too. So you have a whole demographic that doesn't have a necessary relationship with a financial institution, right? And so in general, they have maybe have had limited access to financial services, right? So in an instance when everyone is entitled, right, to receive some support from the government and at scale in the US, there's been a lot of challenge in terms of, okay, hey, how do I bring these folks into into the financial domain, into the digital domain quickly, right? I think as well, if you look at traditional banked customers, right? So the banks are also trying to solve for, okay, hey, you maybe have a bank account, but if you're a millennial, you actually may have like a digital wallet that you prefer, right? That you use to access money, whether it be Cash App or Venmo and things like that. And that still hasn't.
It's just on Cash App and Venmo. Like, the rise of that has been massive in the U.S., but we've yet to see a bunch of that in Canada.
Yeah, I think part of that is because the banking system, I think to Katie's point as well, in terms of the partnership with the government, but also the partnerships with the community of banks in Canada, right, have had built out the the digital infrastructure with e-transfer, right? Mm-hmm. And so, it's not to say that a Cash App won't resonate in Canada, because it might serve some, unique purposes or whatnot for millennials and things like that. But in general, if from a P2P, if I want to send money to, Katie or Sheetal or my brother or something like that, there's ways for me to easily do that. And that's been happening for over a decade, right? So, right. Much like I think other areas of financial services or payments, right, with EMV or chip, right, that has been sort of bread and butter for Canadians for a long, long time. I think in the US, there's still room to grow there, right? And so I think
it's shocking to me. You go travel in the U.S. and they still take your credit card away, and they come back and tell you to sign. You're like, I could sign Brent, I could sign Katie right now. No one cares.
There are so many interesting nuances in that, Sheetal, that have made it so hard to move payments forward in the U.S. That, I mean, Brent, actually, you could probably even talk to more of them, but.
Yeah, well, I think, it's funny because, they say never waste a good crisis, right? And if you look at how delayed the move to EMV and chip cards and the challenge it has been to gain wide adoption within the US. But now with, no customer wants to, handle cash, whether it be Canada, the US, or wherever. And merchants.
The shady people do.
They'll always be cash or maybe in gold. But, yeah, if you're a business in the U.S. as well too, now is the moment where you're like, hey, I don't want to, have to expose my employees from having to accept cash. So, if anything is going to be an accelerant for contactless payments or digital payments, it is this pandemic, right? Where you're seeing businesses needing electronic payment services and accepting chip cards is a way forward there.
So I want to switch gears a little bit, Katie. The Scotia Bank's been going through a digital transformation, and that word gets completely watered down, or means something different to everybody, I should say. I think all intent is in the right place when people want to go on a transformation journey. Now that you've actually had a chance to show the bank and show everyone, hey, look, things could be done in a very fluid process, an agile process, as quick as a week, that gets rolled out to a large portion of your customer base. What's next on like the product roadmap? Like, what do you have in your backlog that you guys are working on, to put it in product terms, or what's in the icebox of what's going to come next?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing that I certainly did spend quite a bit of time reflecting on in the pandemic is that we, as part of the digital transformation we've been on, we spent quite a bit of time totally replatforming our mobile experience about a year ago. And if we hadn't done that, and if we hadn't made that type of investment, certainly navigating trying to get something done in a week would have been 100 times harder than what it was for us. And so there were some kind of key investments that we've made previously that have paid dividends. So we are on, we're already on a bi-weekly or monthly release schedule, which, before that used to be probably about every 3 months we were kind of releasing software. And I'd say probably on average we're releasing about every 2 weeks right now, which makes things a lot easier for us to move quickly around things. So that's been a huge kind of DevOps and engineering transformation that we've undergone over the past couple of years. Where we're really going now is, if you look at the evolution of kind of a financial services relationship in the olden days, so kind of before all of our lifetimes, really, banks kind of started as this trusted place where you could kind of put your money and you held it and you knew someone wasn't going to lose your money for you. And then we kind of evolved into a transactional relationship, especially from a digital perspective. I'd say most banks really went to a digitization of presenting information. So if you look at kind of the early versions of like a mobile app or a website, it's kind of like a digitized version of your statement. And then you can also transact. So you can do things like transfer or pay bills. Where we're really evolving to is that, yes, all of those things are critical. You have to still be able to do the things you want to do, and you have to be able to get the information you want to get. But moving much more to an advice or human-centric relationship around our customers. My goal is that everyone can be free from worry around their finances. And so that you shouldn't have to even necessarily go into the app and check transactions, because I can alert you if something's suspicious, or I can flag for you if you're overspending based on what your patterns are. There's a huge number of, a huge portion of the population is really not super interested in spending a lot of time thinking about their finances. And I think
you see it everywhere, right? Like the literacy of finances. And I was surprised to see that the government's actually going to start teaching more about what it actually means to save and invest, like starting in grade 9, at least here in Ontario. But that, so Brent, this is something you and I were talking about, and Katie, I want you to continue on, but like the personalization of helping me with my finances is something that the bank, doesn't necessarily do well. You had these startups like Mint and other ones come out that try to help you do that, but why doesn't my bank do it for me? I mean, my bank knows me intimately since in my case, since I was 13, right? So why has it been so slow to like create that personalization when you have all this rich data?
I mean, it's a good.
I put you on the hot seat.
No, it's okay. This is. I love this. I love this topic, actually. So I think part of what's taken us to get there is that there was a lot of kind of replatforming, and you had to kind of get this shop back out and kind of clean up a lot of kind of old technology for us to be able to string things together in a way to create a really seamless experience. So for the past few years, we've been doing a lot of that work. And now is actually the part that I'm super excited about, because we've kind of done all this replatforming and we've done all this reorchestrating our data and getting things in a way that we can use it. And we're now really running full steam ahead towards this insight and advice driven experience, and really shifting the way you think about both financial literacy and financial services away from often historically people have thought about financial literacy as I'm just going to give you a bunch of information about how financial services work. And what we've learned through understanding people as opposed to the topic is that actually is not a very effective way to get people to understand their finances for a lot of the population. We actually have to help guide them and provide kind of the scaffolding around their own financial relationship. And so that's the part that we're working on right now, which is fundamentally changing the way in which you think about a banking relationship to a holistic view of what you're trying to accomplish and how we can support and help get you there. So it's super fun. But
very cool. I think the time is right too, because like if I look, I think everybody is has kind of become a day trader with no sports or anything else on. But it's really, I mean, it's true if you actually gamify your own finances on how you could win and progress, you really need the scaffolding, as you said, and the right knowledge so that you're able to do that. Brent, why is it so hard to send a payment, man?
You know, I mean, if you think about it, right, the banking and payment system has worked, right? Like if I need to send you a payment, worst case, I can, write a check, and that's guaranteed, almost guaranteed delivery, if you will. So it actually works, right? So I think the crux.
But the process of writing a check is not as easy as like, hey, my basement flooded, there's damage, send me a check. Like there's a whole
for sure
process that goes through that, which actually causes delays and frustrations. I'm talking from my own experience, obviously, here.
How's your basement, Sheetal?
Knock on wood right now. It's perfect in this house. It's perfect in this house.
Good stuff. Yeah, but I think, the challenge.
But just a side note, sump pump. Everybody get a sump pump.
Okay. Save some money. But I mean, the thing is that, sending a check, if you will, the most basic format has worked for a long, long time, right? And so now, how do you make sure that you deliver an experience that is just as reliable, or you've improved on that, right? And so I think now you're seeing with the technology available, right? You have the ability to kind of leapfrog, right? If you look at environments, and I spent a lot of time working in the developing world, the banking system, payment system wasn't there in the last 10 years, right? So they've been able to leapfrog, right? Forget, a wire transfer, something like just using your mobile phone, right? To be able to send money to, from, and that's working extremely well. We're solving for digitization of check-based payments for insurance carriers, right? Like my family went through this experience where my wife was sick, had a critical illness, made a claim, and the insurance carrier, of course, denies the claim. And so we have to fight. Finally, they approve the claim. But what happens next is that we're waiting over a month to receive the actual payment. It's nowhere to be found, right? So we're calling into the call center, and they're saying to us, "Oh, hey, the check is in the mail."
And you're draining the financial institution's resources doing this, even though it should just be dispersed to you, right? Like there's a huge cost that's going into this.
Yeah, and it's so shitty, right? The time when you need it most, right? With us, with my family, it was when my wife was sick and I had a young child and we needed the funds. If you look at the pandemic, it could be when a business is about to go belly up if they don't get the government support, right? You're sending a check that can be lost in the mail. But the good news is that we're seeing financial institutions open up their legacy banking infrastructure. Katie's mentioned about replatforming, but essentially building the tool set and enabling a customer or a business to receive a payment digitally, right? So this is happening, and I think if in the context of a large FI, like Dream works with probably the 3 of the top 10 financial institutions in North America, and
could you name them? Could you name them?
I won't, but
okay.
They can really get that.
I'll get you some other time.
Absolutely. The thing is, these FIs, they're seeing really innovative, scrappy, well-funded fintechs coming out with phenomenal solutions, right? So the last thing a large FI wants to do now is potentially lose a relationship with someone like yourself, Sheetal, who's been, banking with a certain bank for 20, 30 years, right? And losing out just to technology. So, replatforming is happening. banks are partnering with some fintechs like Dream as well to deploy the technology, but at the end of the day, provides the personalization, provides the digital experience, and allows that customer to benefit from the rise of digital as well.
So Katie,
I think there's a...
Go ahead.
I think there's also another piece of it, which I think we often don't talk about. And I totally agree, Brent, with, kind of your perspective around building the capabilities and building the tools for people to use. One thing that I think has been one of the most surprising things for me, and maybe it shouldn't have been joining the bank, is that even when we have the tools and even when we make things really easy and even when we make them available, we as people also get in a habit of doing things in a certain way. Mm-hmm. And there are aspects of sometimes doing things in a more analog way that people feel more comfortable with, or there's pieces of that they use to kind of reconcile their own finances. So I've spent a lot of time interviewing our customers who are still choosing to, let's say, write a check when they could do an e-transfer, or choosing to go into a branch to pay a bill when they could do it online. And we're trying to understand what it is about that physical experience, that it's not actually always about making it the easiest and most seamless. Sometimes we need to replicate that feeling of reconfirming, being able to double check, being able to get a confirmation. One of the things people really like, for example, about paying a bill in the branch, which I've learned, is that they like to go in and they like to talk to someone and they get the stamp.
They get the stamp.
Yeah. The stamp is like so
my
important.
wife doesn't.
So many people.
Yeah, she doesn't like it when I pay bills online and I write down a number. She goes, "You might have messed that confirmation number up. I like the stamp on the bill."
Yeah. So this is actually this was a huge realization for me, because I was like, I just have to make it super easy and super seamless, and everyone's going to come. And the stamp is this huge thing. And so then I spent a bunch of time understanding the stamp. People like the physicality of it. Now in the app, when you, if you do a bill payment, we give you a sound reinforcement of confirmation. It's not a stamp. We debated that. We debated having a stamp now. Yeah. You know what? Maybe we will. Maybe that'll be a future version. But we did. We had sound reinforcement. We put even more information on the confirmation screen. We prompt people to take a screenshot if they want, and really trying to replicate actually all of this human element aspect of things. Mm-hmm. That I think we sometimes, at least I was probably underestimating the prevalence and the deep strength of that. So one of the things that we've seen is things that we had. You can do almost everything digitally right now, but we still see people going to the branch to do things like pay bills and things like that.
Right.
And the rise of people staying at home has led individuals who had a preference for maybe the stamp or going to talk to someone to try out a different way of doing things. And I think one of the things that will be most interesting, at least for me, is how much of this behavior sticks. So if we think about how much of it is habit forming, where if you get comfortable paying a bill online, after, when you're more comfortable moving freely, are you going to go back to the stamp? Or have you kind of developed a comfort with a new way of doing things, which is a very interesting hypothesis that I don't know the answer to yet.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have to keep us updated, because driving behavioral change is the hardest thing, right?
I love that your wife loves the stamp. That's
she
great.
loves the stamp. She also hates hearing your check is on hold. She's like, I've never bounced a check in my life. Why would you ever put a check on hold?
Fair enough. But just to touch on, by extension with what Katie's mentioned there, I think it's funny because what we're seeing is that we rolled out a full digital experience, right, to digitize a check, right? So to eliminate a check. But what we found, and particularly with working with large insurance carriers, is that it's one thing to send out it's sort of a notification that you've got a pending claim payment, and click this button in your email to then go receive a digital payment quickly. But you still have the base of customers, no matter what, that want that paper, right? Want that, that check, right? And whether it's 5% or 15% or something, you still have to, the ideal solution allows those who are sort of digital natives or digital forward to be able to embrace that experience, but also support those who still want to stay analog. They know it's comfortable, and they'll never, or not in the near future. It's sort of like, I think tribal's one of your tagline is write the future. I think you write the future, but it's at the same time, you have to respect the past, right?
Of course.
You have to respect those that aren't going to be able, for whatever reason, to embrace. And so we've had to implement a concept that says every time we put out a digital solution for an insurance carrier or a bank, you have to be able to default to normal. And when we say default to normal, that is, okay, if you don't accept the notification to receive a digital payment, you can opt in for the paper check to be delivered, if you will, right? So that kind of respect the past, default to normal. That's very important to make sure that this is a ubiquitous solution and you're not leaving out customers that have you've served for a long, long time.
Well, Brent, isn't the normal going to change with demographics? I mean, like the old school ways of doing things are going to eventually die off, right? Like, aren't you just servicing off a segment of the population doing it the old way that's just declining in usage?
Yeah, I mean, you would think, but then I see my dad, who, like, I'm CEO of a tech company, but I'm tech support for my dad.
Aren't we all, right? I'm tech support for everyone. Everyone just looks at me going, "Hey, Indian guy, let me call you."
There you go, right? And do I ever see him getting off of, say, checks and things like that? I don't know. I wouldn't bet on it, right? So there is this segment that, although he's on WhatsApp, and during the pandemic, he did his first video call with my kids and things like that. That's I guess, a step forward, if you will. But we'll see.
Well, shout out to Derek there.
I mean, that relationship between family members is also super important to try and get people to adopt new things. And it's one of the things we did during COVID was we learned that a lot of people feel uncomfortable even if we're telling them how to do it, and they need someone they trust to say, hey, this is actually okay. And so we rolled out a whole series with informational content and how-to videos targeted at this is how you can have a conversation with someone you care about to teach them how they can do things digitally, which was a different approach for us. Actually, we hadn't really ever done that before. We'd been really focused around self-learning and self-service, and now this idea of you not wanting, your mom or your grandmother to go into a branch, especially if they're higher risk, we saw kind of a rise in people trying to teach someone how to not leave their house to be able to do things on their own, which was an interesting change for us.
Cool. All right, we're going to pause here before we get into some more things. This is a segment that I started doing where people get to know you guys, besides all the amazing financial services expertise you have. So, Brent, I'm going to warm you up. I want to get to know you a little better also.
You know some of my secrets, so take it easy.
If you're going to sing a song at karaoke night, what song would it be?
Oh, my God. Oh, wow.
Come on, man. This is rapid fire. What comes to first in mind? Man. It's all right if it's Biggie.
No, for some reason, Pour Some Sugar on Me just jumped in my head.
Nice. Def Leppard.
That's a good choice, Brian. Yeah.
Katie, would you rather ride a bike, ride a horse, or drive a car?
Ride a bike, for sure.
Okay. Do you currently ride bikes?
I currently ride a bike. Yeah.
Cool.
I love getting around biking. I find it so relaxing. It changes my commute I find driving kind of stressful at the best of times, and biking, I feel like it's an enjoyable way to get somewhere.
See, I'm the opposite. I just recently got a bike, and it's
interesting.
I find it stressful. I start pedaling around the road, and I'm like, everyone's trying to kill me out here. It's maybe me because I'm like, I'm just super paranoid.
I think it depends on where you're biking. Like, I don't like to bike on super busy streets, but if you're, if you're in a bike lane, for example, and you're just kind of cruising along. Yeah. Sure.
Brent, what's your biggest fear?
Oh, fear.
Nothing, I'm Brent.
No. It's my kids. It's just my I've got two girls, and my kids being safe and secure. And safe for my kids, yeah.
You know what? You're raising them great. They'll be fine. Katie, what's the last movie you saw, and did you like it?
Last movie I saw. Oh, you know what? Actually, I'm super behind the times, but I just watched Star Wars Rogue One, and I liked it. It was good. I thought it's been I'm really late on this one, but I should watch this at some point.
It's the first name basis version of Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
The next topic we're going to talk about is small, medium businesses that I want to get into with you guys. But before we do that, Brent, I want you to promote a small, medium restaurant that if it was safe to do so, you could bring all your family and friends to go eat at. What would it be?
So our office is in Liberty Village, and there's a restaurant called Barcelona Tavern, kind of a Spanish tapas place. And the service is great, the food is amazing, great patio setup kind of thing. So I'd probably say that. We go there quite a bit when we can.
Awesome. Katie, where would you go?
I just went back to one of my favorite spots on Sunday now that patios are open. And so there's this really great French restaurant in the east end of Toronto called Gare de l'Est. And they have awesome tartare and a great burger. And it's one of my favorite spots. Awesome.
Brent, I know you're super passionate about small, medium businesses, especially when it comes to financial services. Why are small, medium businesses, when they are a pretty big portion of the economy, so underserviced when it comes to banking?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and Katie might be able to give you more details, but I think in general,
but you're seeing it too, because you're bringing solutions for them that the bank generally hasn't done themselves.
I think in general, right, if you look at an individual, even though in aggregate, right, small, mid-sized businesses, they're probably, over 30 million in North America, but each individual one, right, doesn't have a, huge bank balance, doesn't have a ton of cash flow going through the business as well too. So, for the bank, and you can look at, the large base of retail customers as well as large enterprises that they serve. In general, historically it's been like, and the SMBs have been an afterthought. But I think with fintechs that are serving the SMBs, providing fantastic solutions. If you look at Square, I was just checking, I was an investor in a company that was bought by Square, and it's unbelievable. That, when the stock price of Square and their IPO was sort of sub $12. Now I think it's about 125 or 130 US, right?
Right.
And their whole
keeps rising. It's nuts. It just keeps going and going.
Yeah, and it just shows you, right, the market is realizing that power of SMBs, and if you can provide differentiated and personalized solutions for those SMBs, you really have a great franchise there. So I think historically, yes, but end of the day, SMBs are the engines of our economy, and to come out of this pandemic with the people that SMBs employ, right, what they provide to the economy, that they are more and more a focus for FIs, and we're seeing that with our client base and the solutions that we're providing to SMBs.
Cool. Katie, what's your take on it?
I mean, it's a space that we're certainly looking at quite a bit, even across the banks and with the government. One of the areas that I do spend a fair bit of time looking at is the Canadian government is looking to modernize really all of the way in which we do payments in the country. So under the Payments Modernization Initiative, some of what we're looking at.
Payroll, just help us with payroll. Why is payroll so difficult? That's a simple one, right?
Yes, that is a great, that one I don't know the answer to, but there are some great, I mean, I can say that from my startup days, there are some really great payroll startups that are doing a great job in that space, especially here in Canada, that are helping to kind of take down the monolithic difficulty that exists in some other places. So we're looking, I think also the needs for small and medium-sized businesses have shifted quite quickly in a way that the offerings haven't kept up with as quickly as they may have. So if you think about Brent and his example before about checks was actually a very active way in which a lot of people many years ago were managing even their business. And we've had to kind of shift the way in which we think about how companies do their finances, how they pay bills, how they pay their employees, how they receive money. And there's a lot of players, we partner with Intuit and QuickBooks, for example, that are tackling aspects of that space. But I think we're really in the midst of quite a large overhaul at the moment about what the needs of those customers are and how we can better service them. I mean, certainly a key aspect has been from a payments perspective, a lot of the platforms that are leveraged by large corporate and commercial clients are really almost too complex or too powerful, and then therefore too expensive for a small business. And so being able to change the way we approach technology and building software, I think, is also going to help to deliver, good solutions like, Brent's able to provide at a cost that is manageable for a small business.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I'll give you a personal story. Even our TribalScale accounts. I mean, there was a time when I had to walk around with this token key, just to log into my bank account, and I couldn't do it on my Mac. I had to have this other IE6. I don't know what the heck they were trying to make me do, just to go look at your bank balances, and it was mind-boggling to me that why would you do that to. If that's happened to me, that was happening to everybody else out here, and it's very frustrating.
So the token bit is really one around we spend a lot of time, protecting customers either from phishing or account takeover. Because if you think about getting a credential, one of the most important things that I spend my time thinking about is making sure that we're protecting people's login, even from their own human error.
Sure.
We now have soft tokens, so you can now use your phone. So
you get two-factor and off you go. Yeah,
that's a huge change on that. But certainly the hard token bit was really around protecting people, as much as it seems like it was really annoying. And we've moved beyond that at least now. But that was kind of the idea behind that one. But I get it. Yeah.
And so, Brent, you kind of are becoming more of the glue, right? Between my accounting software and my financial services my financial services institution, to allow me to not only collect money but pay money. How is your portal working when it comes into how it's done traditionally now? What are some of the nuances that Dream is solving?
Yeah, I mean, I think. The key thing here is that if you look at a financial institution and the crown jewels, right, and then Katie mentioned it, right, it's helping protect your money account, protect your account, protect your identity, right, and the banks, can solve and provide different applications and build and things like that. But I think over the next, whether it be 5 years or 10 years, I think the key thing, and this is the work that we do, is really looking at, okay, the bank can be the operating system that enables third parties to deliver, whether it be personalized or very SMB vertical or segment specific solution. And so the bank, literally, I look at it providing an operating system and a stack that third-party fintechs can develop against and provide really innovative solutions at scale and at speed to end customers, whether that be a business like an insurance vertical like we service, and then retail customer, wealth management, whatever it may be, right? And so one of the things that we do is we provide a middleware in the insurance space, right, where it allows an insurance carrier to send a real-time payment to whether it be your digital wallet, your bank account, your debit card, whatever it may be. And we partnered with the financial institutions to leverage their core legacy banking infrastructure and putting in this sort of middleware. If you think of it as an operating system, then an application can be built on. And so I think that's not just Dream, right? We're seeing this in other markets. When you look at the rise of open banking, which is really opening up the banking systems in a secure way for third parties to provide value-added services and applications to the bank's customers. And so I think you're going to see this in Canada, in the US. It's been a struggle for a variety of reasons we don't have to get into, but ultimately that will happen. And it's just a matter of when, not if.
So Katie, are you currently looking at, or do you even have like a sandbox that fintechs could go play in and start to show you guys some of the value-added services that they're able to provide?
So we do work with a number of fintechs. One of the things I look at when we're looking at the offering is this something that I really want to be a core competency in and I want to continuously invest in, or is this something where this actually makes sense for me to work with someone whose sole thing that they think about is this offering? So we certainly work with a lot of fintechs that underpin the experience that you see today.
Mm-hmm.
At the moment, the way we have chosen to do it is, as a customer, you're still interacting with Scotiabank, and we're presenting that to you in a way that we're choosing to work with people to help power the experience. But it's certainly something we're looking at around. Part of what Brent talked about is that how do we want to move towards that? How do we want to also be judicious about that? One of the things we recently launched through Verified Me, which is an identity platform that we're partnering with, which is well known, is this idea of data stewardship and data consent. And so if you're working with, an Intuit or a Verified Me, and they're accessing, or they have access through your account, how can we be kind of the custodian of that so that you can manage or revoke that consent at any point in time? And so this idea of data stewardship is something that is super new, but it's a huge focus for us right now around, if we're allowing you to work with other participants, we still want to make sure that we're keeping you safe and that you're able to know what you're getting into, know what you're consenting to, and manage that in a way that works for you. So that's a big piece for me right now, is around this idea of identity and data stewardship.
Cool. Brett, if I was at a large bank, the net I cast is only as good as my network or my knowledge, and so you're looking, and I want you to talk from your fintech shoes. What could the banks be doing to expose themselves to not only startups that have solutions for them, but B, actually startups validating themselves. Are they even ready for the bank? You don't want to go through you don't want to be like, hey, startup, I love what you're doing, come over here, but you don't have any regulatory down. You have your governance is out of whack, your security is crap. There's all these areas that have to be validated. So what are you seeing? Is there an example you can share with us of an institution that's doing it well to say, hey, startups, you come to me instead of me proactively going out to you?
Yeah, yeah. I think, most of the big FIs, if you will, have sort of innovation arms, right? And the innovations arms are being tasked with, figuring out the relationship with third-party fintechs, right? And it's not easy, right?
I thought they just put bowling alleys in their office. I had to take a shot at you guys there. Yeah. Sorry, Katie, I had to say.
I don't, you know what? I don't make it through a conversation without that shot. Yeah.
But ultimately, and I think it's the point I made earlier, right? Is that I think the most forward-thinking individuals of the bank realize, if you look at the parallel to mobile operators or wireless operators, where they're becoming sort of a dumb pipe, right? Where there's all these third-party services that have access to the the backbone that the wireless providers have provided and are building direct relationship with the customers. I think the FIs and the forward-looking ones are thinking themselves as almost like a smart enabler, right? Not a dumb pipe, a smart enabler, right? And looking at your crown jewels, thinking about things like how can the bank's already onboarded that customer, done a KYC, right? So they can be a source of truth or identity for third parties to access and to drive experiences for, right? So ultimately what we see is, and I think it's different stages, right? There's some banks that are more innovative, but ultimately I think overall banks succeed where they're quickly building out this operating system that third parties can access. And those that will struggle will be relegated to just utility or plumbing for financial services.
So those ones that are going to struggle, or we always see, especially in financial services, we've always done it this way. I'm not rocking the ship. I am retiring in a couple of years. Don't you dare mess with my pension. And we're going to leave things as is. Do you see them becoming the dumb pipe, like what we call some telcos now?
You know what? I think there's definitely that potential, right? If you look at some solutions out there where fintechs are bypassing the FIs using things like screen scraping and things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like those are very problematic for an FI, right? Because as Katie mentioned,
but some of these fintechs have done really well.
Exactly. Well, they're doing really well because they're solving a problem, right? They're repetitive fintech apps that need information about that customer, need identity confirmation and things like that. And so, they're solving the problem and they're doing well. And so I think it behooves the FI to say, okay, hey, let's participate in this. And we either provide that operating system or are going to be bypassed through things like screen scraping, or seeing fintechs like I mentioned Square, right? Like, ultimately Square is applied to be, have a banking charter. They will be a bank, right? Serving SMBs and potentially just retail consumers as well too. So, it's either, get smart, open your ecosystem, open your platforms in a standardized way with, say, open banking and things like that, or be very, very challenged to be relevant over time.
Katie, how much of a threat are the FANGs, the Facebooks, the Apples, the Amazons, the Googles, and how they keep dabbling into
financial services?
Services, yeah.
I mean, I think anyone who is not very actively looking at what those companies are doing and the direction they're going, and having that be a significant input to their strategy and their roadmap, is probably missing the fact that these are hugely powerful companies that are able to do really critical things well, like what a holistic customer experience looks like. So it is not something that I am ignoring. I would say I think the flip side to some of the aspect of Brent, you brought up screen scraping. One of the things that banks have learned how to do really well is around kind of the stewardship and trust, and kind of keeping things really locked down, which sometimes makes it harder for us to innovate. But I think between kind of the fintech space and where banks are, we're going to have to meet in the middle to some extent around a lot of that. Like screen scraping is an example. You're giving your password away to you're giving your bank password away to a company. And the way in which that exists today is that company kind of says, I promise I won't use it for anything else. But from place right now where I could say, I'm willing to give this company read-only access, or they're able to see what my credit card transactions are, but they're not allowed to take my money and they're not allowed to do anything on my behalf. And so we're going to have to kind of meet in the middle around, let's just, like, giving away a password is a really ineffective way right now. And so some of the regulation we're working on right now around sharing data, or what open banking could look like, where we can participate in a way that is still protected, I think is going to be really important. And I think we're going to see some of that evolve, both the fintech space and the banking space, and have an impact on the FANGs too, and in terms of what area they choose to enter into.
For sure. Guys, we're at the top of the hour. It flew by. Before we end off, though, I would love for you both to give, majority of our listeners are people working in the digital space, especially this podcast I know is going to be viewed by a lot of FIs. What do you have to say to your friends and colleagues in the FIs as some key takeaways as they go along their digital journeys? Katie, why don't you go first?
I think that So I've now worked in both the startup space and in a banking space, and there's a lot of differences between the two. I think it's think about what change you want to make, and I can certainly run faster when I was a more nimble company, but even if banks are moving slower, if you can move the way a large company works, you can have a lot more impact on kind of the day-to-day lives of people. But it's not easy, but it can be fun. Yeah.
Cool. Brett?
Yeah, I mean, I think, just contextually or just in context, right? This is the pandemic, and we've seen that, digital everything, moving from analog to digital, is happening at an accelerated rate now, right? So, we've got, we're doing this podcast via Zoom, right? I had my daughter's birthday was about a month ago, and we did the whole birthday party with even the grandparents on a video call as well too. So the time is now to really move fast and not break things, move fast and build things, right? Because there's just so much opportunity, and us as consumers are willing to embrace much of digital, right? So it's looking at, okay, hey, what can you innovate? What are your core things that you want to innovate and build yourself? And what can be opened up to third parties, if you will, to allow them to build to better serve your customer base in areas that may not make sense for you to build yourself. So I think key takeaway, move fast and build things.
I love it. Not break things.
Yeah.
It's hard to do when you're trying to build things, but sure. You're going to have to teach me how to do that one day. Thanks, guys, for joining me on today's First Name Basis podcast. The podcast is available on Apple, Spotify, Google, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, pretty much every social channel you could think of. Guys, stay safe out there and keep doing amazing things. Thanks for joining me.
Well, thanks so much.
Sheetal.
Take care.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.